to put the ending on because we had to time travel backwards to put the front part on.
That is very true. Yeah, it wasn't tooth to tail, was it?
No, it wasn't. We've got to be careful, Ken. We're going to tear ourselves apart in the time warp here. We're literally burning the candle at both ends here.
The New Brunswick Archaeology Podcast, featuring your hosts, Gabe Reinick and Ken Holyoke.
Welcome back to the Brunswick Archaeology Podcast. I'm Gabe Reinick in a sweltering hot Fredericton, New Brunswick, and I'm joined, as I am every fortnight, by Ken Holyoke, who appears to be in his spare studio there in Lethbridge, Alberta.
Yeah, I'm in the office studio again. It is not sweltering hot here, although it's mild, but it's not. It feels like fall in Lethbridge, put it that way.
Yeah. And I tell you, listener, it's especially disorienting because of all the time travel Ken and I have been doing lately, that when the temperature changes this much, get warmer, even though you've moved forward in time. That's a little bewildering.
You moved so far forward in time, Gabe, that you entered an alternate timeline in the last episode where you saw a Jason Isbell show that never actually happened.
That's right. I did see a Jason Isbell show that never actually happened. And I'm going to assume it was just like the other time I saw a Jason Isbell show, except it did happen.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And so I think what we've got here is our first, we've entered into the New Brunswick Archaeology Podcast multiverse.
We have, yes.
And so we're on a branched timeline of the New Brunswick Archaeology Podcast.
We are, yeah, and I think it's funny, Ken. I actually have I tend to have a bit of a hard time with shows canceling. This is not a new thing for me, except that it's always David Bromberg. I've been trying to see David Bromberg for years, and either he cancels or something comes up, and it's been very difficult for me in that regard. But that's all right, Ken. So I guess that means we're going to get double the listens, though. Is that how that works? Each listen is worth double?
I think so, except that who knows? In that other timeline, does the show keep going on? Was 10K the end? Who knows?
Great question. I mean, but what it does mean, if Canadian Club or Tim Hortons is listening, we have a sponsorship opportunity for each of you, a separate sponsorship opportunity.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right. But speaking of sponsors, Ken, our sponsor this fortnight, as it is usually, the Association of Professional Archaeologists of New Brunswick. You cannot find them on the web, but you will be able to someday. And the ULETH Shirk Exchange Grant. And you can find ULETH on the web if you so desire. Go Pronghorns.
Go Pronghorns.
And so, Ken, one of the things the listener has probably noticed at this juncture is that we are still called the New Brunswick Archaeology Podcast. And one of the things that we've been thinking about lately is that it's possible that that name doesn't really encapsulate all the time travel we've been doing, or the kind of broad-reaching topics we have on this show. Like today, we're really going to interview someone whose work spans history, archaeology, material culture, community-engaged research. And so we may need to broaden the title so that we can bring in more listeners who are missing out on things that they might find interesting. So we are going to try to have an excellent prize for the lucky listener who might write in. And if they write in and they have the award, what we think would be an award-winning name for an award-winning podcast, we might adopt their name. But we would never just steal their intellectual property.
No, we always remunerate.
Exactly.
We recognize that labor has a price.
We do. It does. It does have a price. And so, Ken, if the lucky listener had some labor that they wanted to send us, where would they send it?
They would send that email to newbrunswickarchaeology@gmail.com. That's New Brunswick Archaeology, all one word, archaeology spelled ARCHAEOLOGY, newbrunswickarchaeology@gmail.com. And if you're ever wondering about the New Brunswick Archaeology Podcast, you can also find us on the web at newbrunswickarchaeology.com. And that's New Brunswick Archaeology, all one word, archaeology spelled ARCHAEOLOGY.
That's right. And so, Ken, you just used a couple of big, scary words. Words like remunerate and intellectual property. And Ken, I think we've made clear with these prizes over the last few seasons that we aren't afraid to talk about the tough topics archaeologists may be facing, not just professionally, but in their personal life, and especially when the professional life can spin into the personal life. And I think, Ken...
Where is this going?
Well, Ken, I mean, we've each been in some hairy situations in this business, and some of them together. And from being threatened from angry duck hunters to dealing with irate clients, but I think we can both agree that a particularly unpleasant kind of day in this business is anyone that involves phrases like intergovernmental lawsuit, mortgage, not so fast, impugning an officer of the crown, no pending allegations, and, quote, I don't know if you've ever watched Perry Mason, but... And that's right, Ken. Oh, hold on a second, Ken. Emmanuel's waving to me from the booth. Okay, what is it? Okay, so I've just been handed a document that's on...
Here we go, Gabe.
Uh-oh. This is very high-quality paper. So, Ken, I don't know if you can see this, but this looks like expensive paper. And, okay, let me just have a look here. Thanks, Emmanuel.
You're welcome.
Oh, sorry, Ken. So I actually can't finish what I was just about to say there because our legal counsel has just advised me it would be unwise for me to proceed along that line of discussion. But, Ken, that actually sort of proves our point here. When you're confronted with an uncomfortable situation as an archaeologist, the kind of situation that seems like it might result in a massive lawsuit, misdemeanor charges, or career-ending libelous accusations, it's important to have a lawyer in your corner. And Ken, it's no secret to say that in the past, we have not always kept legal counsel on retainer, and instead we've been obligated to rely on the advice of attorney friends who you might know from the golf course and I might know from the bar. And sure enough, the fellow you knew observed that we were involved in wasn't exactly, quote, white shoe law. And the guy I knew used this confused phrase considering the context, and that phrase was disbarred. And then he handed me a solo cup of wild turkey and said, Joe's rule number 2, if you have to leave a party, you always take a traveler. And that's the challenge, Ken. Most attorneys at law are just not equipped to deal with both the complications of heritage law, your typical destruction of cultural resource valuations, matters of overlapping jurisdiction, and so forth, and the kinds of issues archaeologists themselves are confronted with. And look, Ken, I know there's going to be some listeners out there who say, well, maybe if these boys were just more cautious, they wouldn't need some pit bull lawyer. And Ken, I think the absurdity of that sentiment is what a lawyer would call prima facie stupid. Would you trust a physician without malpractice insurance, a driver without liability insurance, or a mobbed-up New York taxi token scheme without at least one lawyer involved, ideally with a name like Tony? And when you need your own wartime consigliere in this business, you need one who knows not just the business, but the humans who make up this business. A lawyer who's got the ticker, who knows archaeology from the ground down and the ground up. And Ken, that's why we have this special offer. We're going to put the lucky listener who renames this podcast on retainer with our own legal counsel. In fact, they'll help you out right away by negotiating the transfer of your IP over to us. Because when you're in a jam, you don't need a white shoe firm. You need a brown work boot attorney who understands things like provenance, title, and ownership issues, museum government, import-export, community benefit agreements, and conservation easements. But you also need one that understands that when an archaeologist is facing serious litigation, a lawyer needs to have heart to recognize your fear in that situation, and an approach to the law that's like a pit bull on a rabbit covered in bacon fat. So not only can our guy handle complex litigation, libel, slander, baseless accusations of damage, and so on, he can deal with the other kinds of legal issues an archaeologist might confront, like cease and desist orders, mortgages, misdemeanor trespass, contested divorce, and disorderly conduct. Because, Ken, you know the old saying, a lawyer represents himself as a fool for a lawyer and a fool for a client? An archaeologist who represents himself pro se as a fool for a lawyer, a fool for a client, an annoyed judge, and a multi-million-dollar adverse settlement. Offer void in Ohio, some restrictions may apply. But other than that, Ken, other than those restrictions that particularly apply in Ohio, where would the lucky and soon-to-be well-represented listener send in their winning new name for this podcast so our guy can get right on transferring your IP?
Email us at newbrunswickarchaeology@gmail.com. That's New Brunswick Archaeology, all one word, archaeology spelled ARCHAEOLOGY, newbrunswickarchaeology@gmail.com.
That's right. Ken, if you open up that mailbox, what's in there today? And so it's funny, listener, the mailbox, is, as Ken's opening it here, the dates on your emails are just swirling around and around and around like a sort of dream sequence in a early 2000s movie. He's,
yes.
I think, listening to a song by the Shins as this is happening.
Okay, we've got a couple here. Some of them are follow-ups. We do have some listeners that I recognize that we respond to you on the air, and then I forget to write the emails to you. And so we are on a sticker mailing spree right now.
Yeah, we have a spreadsheet, in fact, listener. That's how committed we are to trying to track you down to get you your stickers.
Not just committed to it. The only way that I will remember something is by creating an actual, either a digital or a physical reminder, and by looping Gabe in on this through a shared spreadsheet, I can now ensure that somebody else's memory will be leading to us getting these.
While we're riffing on that, we've ordered more stickers too, which is going to hopefully address some of the sticker backlog. We think we've found 2 potentially ethical purveyors, or at least semi-ethical purveyors of stickers.
Yes, yeah. So we're trying them out. So we're going to have a new tranche of stickers from 2 different distributors.
Including limited edition season 3 stickers, am I right?
Limited edition season 3 S3 stickers are going to be coming in the mail sometime. I got a confirmation that they're being produced right now.
That's right, Tokyo Drift stickers.
Tokyo Drift, yep, that is right. We are in our Tokyo Drift days. So we got an email back from Dimity, and who says, "Thank you for correctly pronouncing my name, first of all." She said she'd love to chat to us about New Brunswick archaeology in the olden primitive days. And so we will be following up with Udimity separately. She says, Holt's Point is a bit of a blur, and I don't think I even have my thesis, but it was fun. More fun was my defense. You see, I was the first in the department to write my thesis on a computer. The mainframe at UNB, believe it or not. Oh, wow, I like where this is going. And was able to generate pages of unintelligible, even to me, statistics. Of course, the profs had no idea what they meant either, but valiantly tried to ask intelligent questions because my defense was being recorded live by the owner of the Holt's Point site, who happened to be a well-known orchestra conductor. Oh, wow. If I remember correctly, Chris T was not able to be there, and none of the anthropofs were very familiar with archaeology. I also crewed on the Partridge Island dig in the summer of '82, which was memorable. David Black was on the crew that summer. Oh, cool. As to what was happening here, we are in the very early stages, but the contrast of work in middens and in the desert is very interesting. Anyway, as you well know, the retelling of fieldwork is usually much better than the work itself, with the rain, heat, mosquitoes, black flies, etc. But I would be glad to go reminisce. I've been trying to think of a new name for the podcast, but I fear nothing comes to mind other than perhaps memories of meanderings among the Mi'kmaq, or perusing the past with the Passamaquoddy, or maybe Wolastoqey wanderings in the wilderness. I do like, quote, New Brunswick archaeology, Dimity. So thank you for that, Dimity. That's your mail will be coming very soon. Some stickers in the mail, and
your mail and a request to appear on the New Brunswick Archaeology podcast.
Exactly.
So, I have to say, I was pretty thrilled to receive that email.
Yes. Yeah,
it was very exciting. Yeah.
So okay, we've got some podcast name ideas from Naheem and Tanya, so their name ideas are: number 1, Between the Aggregates; number 2, Lessons from the Underworld; 3, Terrace Library; 4, Scientists of Life; 5, Evidence Impact, EI, catchphrase, quote, join us on EI, unquote.
I feel like these make us sort of sound like villains in a video game, don't they, Ken?
I'm not sure. Neil deGrasse Tyson versus New Brunswick archaeology. At the end of Neil's podcast, he says, keep looking up. Well, we say, keep, quote, looking down. Neil's let us find common ground in the podcast space and find out what multidisciplinary fields can dig up for us. Look forward. Neil on our podcast. Thanks to all
thank you very much for that.
And the New Brunswick Archaeology Podcast. Peace, health, success, smiles, and belly laughs. The Black Rose Nation. Well, thank you. Thank you to Naheem and Tanya and the Black Rose Nation, which I'm not sure what the Black Rose Nation is, but we'll have to look it up. It's somewhere on the Kingston Peninsula.
Oh, very cool. Well, and thank you so much for the suggestions and for listening.
Yeah. I'm gonna actually mark this unread so that I actually remember to respond to these people.
That's a great idea.
That's a good technique.
And we should
Okay.
say, actually, listener, another thing that's helpful, if when you write in, if you include a mailing address, that makes it a little bit easier for us to get you your stickers.
Yes, more efficiently, so that there's not a 6-month delay, as there sometimes can be. So Michael
Or
writes
there
in
is,
again.
but it's exclusively our fault,
Yeah, exactly.
as opposed to the 97% our fault.
Michael, east of the Rockies, from Vermont.
East of the Rockies, you're on the air.
Yes. So he says he's good with stickers for now, and he just saw/heard an archaeology story today on Vermont Public Radio that might be of interest.
Oh, cool.
Ceramic artifacts, apparently pre-contact, found near Lake Champlain in a location where they had been buried and thus protected since the 1930s. The University of Vermont is involved in research there. There are indications of trade and exchange reaching far south and north. Here's a link. Well, I have
Very cool.
clicked on that link. And archaeologists find 500-year-old pottery in Milton. They're going to keep digging. And it looks like John Kroc is involved, who is somebody that you know quite well, right?
I actually don't know him personally, but he runs the UVM Vermont. So this University of Vermont Consulting branch. So there's CRM
okay,
company
that's why I recognize
UVM.
the name. Yeah,
Yep,
yeah, he runs
exactly.
the CRM company that runs the consulting archaeology program. Yeah, excellent.
That's right. Yeah, I
Very
think we've
cool.
corresponded, but I don't think I've met him in person.
Okay, well, I'll send you the this article, and thank you, Michael. Thank you for drawing attention
thank you,
to
Michael.
that.
Ken, why don't we just go ahead and throw that in the show notes? So
I think we will.
listener can-
Yeah,
Excellent.
I think we will. So
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Michael. And I tell you, Michael, on a day like today, I could sure use a maple creamy. It's
man, I've been thinking about those for since we've been talking about them. I wonder if there's anybody that does that locally. If there's a way to capture, I know it won't have that that signature Vermont dairy in it, but
yeah. Well, Ken, as you know, I'm writing the shirk here, and I can add it in. I mean, I think
there you go. Yeah, I think that is that's definitely a legitimate project expense, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
The per diem is Latin for ice cream money.
exactly. And that's it for the mailbag today.
All right. Well, Ken, if a listener wants to write in, where would they email?
NewBrunswickArchaeology@gmail.com.
That's right. And thank you very much to everyone who wrote in. And like we said, we are working on getting those stickers out into the mail. And I think, Ken, actually, we're scheming about some other swag ideas in the future. So stay tuned about that, listener.
Yeah. Once we've secured a reliable supplier,
Yes.
I think we'll venture out into other graphic designs. And I think Emmanuel, our intrepid producer, is also working on some other graphic design and other things that might be integrated with the podcast here in the coming months.
I think that's right. And so that's pretty exciting. And speaking of pretty exciting, Ken, we've got an exciting episode for the listener coming up here, where we're going to be joined by Dr. Mary McCarthy-Brandt to talk about her nonprofit, which is called REACH, which is an acronym for Remembering Each African Cemetery's History here in New Brunswick. And so she's doing a lot of interesting work on making more visible the segregated cemeteries here in New Brunswick.
That's right. And great interview, and we hope you enjoy it, and we'll talk to you after the interview, listener.
Talk to you soon. Today we're joined by Dr. Mary McCarthy-Brandt. Dr. McCarthy-Brandt's research focuses on New Brunswick segregated and forgotten African-Canadian graveyards. In 2021, Dr. McCarthy-Brandt started the nonprofit REACH in New Brunswick, with REACH, R-E-A-C-H, an acronym for Remembering Each African Cemetery's History. The mandate of that organization is, quote, to reverse the erasure of Black history in New Brunswick and to locate, identify, preserve, and record Black graves in New Brunswick. Dr. McCarthy-Brandt is based in Fredericton much of the time, where she is a leader in the Black community and a prominent and prolific public commentator. Her doctorate is from the University of Toronto Institute for Studies in Education, and her scholarship has appeared in Acadiensis and numerous books. She's also received an impressive list of awards, including an honorary Doctor of Letters from St. Thomas University here in Fredericton. Thank you for joining us, Dr. McCarthy-Brandt.
Thank you.
And nice to see you again, Mary. It was great to meet you at the CAAs this past spring. So
Yes.
And so we want to start off, and as we mentioned, your work in New Brunswick is on the erasure of Black history, and your work focuses especially on Black cemeteries. Could you describe your history with this work, the challenge that you and REACH are working to remedy? And I'm going to ask you about this later, but flipping through your dissertation, there's some photos actually from just in behind my parents' house, basically. So the Diamond Aree graveyard. I grew up on Matquack Heights, and so some of your research is actually very near and dear to where I grew up, and a place that I spent a lot of time hanging out in the woods around, actually, when I was a kid. So really great to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Could you describe your history with this work and the challenge that you and Reach are working to remedy?
Certainly.
So this project, my dissertation, the project of working with lost and abandoned cemeteries has been kind of a lifelong project, starting maybe in the early 90s. I had finished my master's degree and was thinking about a topic, was thinking about doctoral work, thinking about a topic, but knew I wanted to focus on the Black experience in New Brunswick. And so I'm not really sure which came first, but I know that I've always been attached to the elders and the ancestors. And I've always said, and if you've had any time to review my dissertation, it's really dedicated to my ancestors who, for whatever reason, have came to New Brunswick and truly lived remarkable lives. So growing up in a multi-generational family, as a young child, I was always, reverence was something that was instilled in me, whether my ancestors were in our living room or we had to go to funerals and graves. So probably in the early 90s, I became aware of one particular cemetery that was attached with the Mactaquac Dam. And that's kind of what started me thinking about how I can rectify and highlight my ancestors' stories. Reach came after my dissertation, after I'd written that piece of work. I knew I could not finish. I knew I couldn't just write that piece of work and then park it, because I don't know if you're aware, but I really feel that my ancestors have modeled and guided me in my work. So I just felt I couldn't let them down. So that's how Reach was born. And it's been hard with the nonprofit for funding, et cetera, but we were able to get our first pocket of money from the federal government through the BBI, Black Business Initiative, which managed a pot of money for Black nonprofits and entrepreneurs. And
Congratulations.
our grant was accepted. I mean, I think there was $1.2 million that was going to be spread across Canada. I don't know how much Atlantic Canada got, but we still have a bit of our first allotment, so that's helped a lot.
That's fantastic. And so is that work that you're obviously not solo. I'm guessing you have a team with you at Reach. That grant probably has helped expand the team a little bit, but.
Yes, well, we're formed as a nonprofit, so we have a board of directors, and our funding, I almost invited my cousin to join the meeting, but I lean heavily on Jennifer Dow, who is a descendant who lives just in Oromocto, and plus we have other Black members, and we have to have a majority of Black board members in order to qualify for the funding. So yeah, it's not really a for-profit organization. It's a nonprofit, and we were able to buy some laptops and, get our Zoom subscription. And I've been able to work on the care and ongoing repair of two cemeteries. So the one close to your family's home, Ken, it's going to be repaired sometime, if it hasn't been now, sometime this fall. And the other bigger cemetery that has like 24 people that we know are buried, and has maybe 12 or 13 tombstones. That's already been repaired. That's the Weary Cemetery. That's off, I don't know the roads, but that back road. Is it 103 maybe? So anyway, when I became aware, it was again in the mid-90s, of this Black cemetery, the family, they had horses all around the cemetery had a wire fence, and it was all overgrown. There were little trees, and it was crazy. But the family's been so great to work with, and he's assured me that he's now purchased more land on the other side of his property. So he said to me, "You never have to worry about the cemetery, Mary, because I now own all the land around it, and what's behind it is like an old creek." So I've written some poetry about the cemetery. There was a terrible, terrible murder that happened in 18. Yeah, so there was a murder, Bertha Weary, and there's talk that she still roams the mouth of the Keswick, and so a lot of very tragic historical parts of that area are tied up on the Weary's cemetery, which is now part of the Dunphy property, where I have total access. And I go in and clean, and Mr. Dunphy just says, "Leave your stuff there, whatever you need to do." I now have a young man who's retired, who keeps it cleaned for me, and he just texts me, "I cleaned the cemetery." In fact, I got a text the other day, "Probably the last for the season, Mary," and then I just e-transfer him money. So I've so to have people to support me. The only thing that cemetery needs is now a new fence, and it needs the actual gate. The gate is now laying on the ground.
Okay. So it sounds like Reach is doing some important work, obviously, but I think the listener might wonder why this work is necessary, right? So could you tell us a little bit about the history of segregation in New Brunswick cemeteries and what sort of practices serve to create these segregated cemeteries?
Yes, well, there's a thing called colonialism. And if you know anything historically about New Brunswick, such a beautiful province, and and this kind of leads into another little project I'm doing, which is I've been asked to create a history course for UNB history to focus on Black history. And,
great.
And my course is going to be called 1783, 1784, and 1785. So 1783 is when my ancestors came, most of them free, who later were enslaved due to lack of work, and came from the U.S. I can even date myself back, if you've heard my presentation, to my fifth great grandmother. What happens with history is that only the people who have power and money can tell the stories, right? Even in recording of birth records, death records, marriages, I've spent so much time in the archives trying to find little glimpses of my family and my community. So with the history of colonization, racism, it's a system of power. Who has power, who does not? And when you are, I'm trying to stay away from these terms that call my community marginalized or minorities, but in fact we were minorities in terms of numbers, but marginalized only due to lack of acceptance and promotion. So, I come from a multi-generational family with my mother was one of 13, my father one of 8. I'm one of 9. So we always had multiple ages in our home. And so, we learned so much from our elders and the multi-generation people. So what is important to say is that due to racism and the system of power and colonization, that my ancestors were hired by European descendant people to work the fields, clean the house, sometimes have their babies, everything, cook, clean. But at the end of the day, they were not allowed to be buried with the people that they were employed by. They were always, as my dissertation says, segregated in death, in life and death. And I want to reverse those negative stories and stereotypes and sing and talk about the beautiful community that I was raised in. And so that's my life's mission. Actually, I just sent my manuscript proposal off to the Mercury series.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Work with me to, not have such a I mean, it's a narrative dissertation, but it is an academic piece of work because that's why I have the PhD. But yeah, I'm hoping that once the dissertation is published, then it can go in community college and schools and be used as a working textbook, because I don't know for Black New Brunswick that there's any work similar to mine that's been out there published. So.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point that you make, that there's not a whole lot of published information, like even working, as I did as a consultant, that there's not a ton of information about even Black cemeteries. And I know that one particularly striking example that you've talked about when it relates to erasure is you mentioned it previously, but also related to the flooding of African Canadian graves that were not removed during the building of the Matquack Dam, basically. And so there's kind of a long legacy of what sort of happened after the dam. I've been involved in projects basically looking at the pre-contact Wolastoqiyik presence on the river. My Holyoke family, our farmstead was upriver at one time, and so can you tell us a little bit about that story and maybe some of the so you had mentioned the Ori Cemetery and some of the segregated places that would have been within what is now the Head Pond area.
What is sad is that I didn't have time to go all over New Brunswick, and that's what REACH is trying to do. But a lot of it has to do with word of mouth, right? And people do contact me when I or myself or Jennifer talk on CBC, we get calls about, did you know that I know Black people are buried here or Black people are buried there? So for my research, I chose 6 cemeteries, 5 of which showed evidence of segregation. And so the first one is the Methodist Cemetery in Woodstock, because I grew up in Woodstock and grew up going to that cemetery and realized that I had to go down a hill and had steps that were eroding with our beautiful winters, and to an area that was very poorly maintained in what was a federally funded cemetery. I mean, the cemetery had like Hugh John Fleming and all these premiers in it. It had federal, designation, I guess. So it was always getting federal monies and stuff. But my family's area and relatives, and there were a few Asian graves too that were marginalized over at the corner. So that's the only cemetery in Woodstock, and in Fredericton it's the Weary Cemetery, and then the Diamond O'Ree Cemetery, the Old Negro Cemetery, which is the cemetery that you just alluded to, that was not erased. I mean, the graves were not relocated, and are now like 165 meters under the St. John River, the mighty Woolastock. So I'm in talks now. It's been such a struggle the last 10, 15 years to deal with government and NB Power, but they've had a new CEO of late, and she just communicates, and she communicates with me. I have, really wanted a public apology. And they've refused that. They said that they will not do a public apology, but they want to do some form of reparative actions to the community. And so they gave, last April or May we met, and they gave me some choices and said, go to your community and come back. So anyway, we haven't decided on anything, but we're working on some type of, I call it a reparations, like maybe an art installation outside the new Fredericton Art Center, or maybe something in front of the library, or one of my cousins suggested maybe at the lookout point there, build some type of a bandstand, that they will maintain and also have the names of our ancestors there, something that stays on forever, because they will be forgotten. So the other cemetery I speak about is the St. Peter's Anglican Church Cemetery. And that cemetery, I'm very connected to the St. Peter's Church because my fourth great grandfather, George Leake, helped build that. He was the main foreman when that church was built in 1837. I mean, that church has seen many rebuildings and new additions and updating. But every time I used to go to that church, or the minister there would say, "Your ancestors are smiling to have one of their descendants." That was with Reverend Hebb. So that cemetery primarily is not segregated. The minister says it's not segregated because everyone is one in Christ. But I disagree with that. I believe it was predominantly a black church at the time. And when the church was built, the residents, and when the main carpenters were of African descent, of course, they had prime access to the graveyard. The other that I've discussed in my dissertation is I speak about a cemetery in St. Andrews, which has been erased, and that is the whole Black history in St. Andrews, which is so very sad, has been erased, with the exception of Edward Mitchell Bannister, who was born in the late 1700s and lived to the mid 1800s, and he was is a very famous artist. Even some of his artwork is now hanging in the White House. And he left St. Andrews and moved to Massachusetts, met his wife. She was quite an entrepreneur. She was part Indigenous and part Black, and she ran a couple salons, teaching schools, and he was able to focus on his art.
So is there anywhere in St. Andrews that commemorates his presence in the community?
I do not believe so. Now, I have been to, there was a gallery opening or a reopening where they focused on portable binders, not binders, but displays that open up. I do not believe so. And maybe now they're coming into it. I just saw on, someone sent me the Globe and Mail, because he grew up, his story is so interesting, Edward Mitchell Bannister. His parents died. He was very much a ward of the state, if that was even possible, in the late 1700s, early 1800s. And he lived with families. And so one of the homes he lived in, because the homes are so old in St. Andrews, I'll send you the article.
Yes, please.
It's on the Globe and Mail. And that particular house is now saying home of, one of the more esteemed artists, Canada and U.S. So I was able to visit that house too, because at one point, and I know the person who owned the home, I don't know if she still does, but when they were renovating in the attic, there was plaster put around the chimney, and someone was painting all around the plastic, and they thought it might have been Edward Mitchell Bannister's work, but I think they into, and I don't think it was his work, but very, very cool. I can't remember the name of the lady, but I have the Globe and Mail article, and I can't even open it because I don't have a subscription. But I can.
Yeah, we'll get. I think Ken has a Globe and Mail subscription, and we'll get the link and put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
So, Dr. McCarthy-Brandt, I think our listeners would be interested, because many of them are interested in archaeology, but also so in archival work and in material culture. And it seems like the work you're outlining really is very multidisciplinary and just methodologically seems very, very challenging. And so I wondered if you could share a little bit about just how you do this, how you find out about these cemeteries, how you make them more visible, and just kind of what your process is.
Truly, how I find out about the cemeteries, the newer ones, is through word of mouth. Like, I've been told for the last probably 8 to 10 years that there's a Howe cemetery. This is an example. A Howe cemetery in Fredericton at the top of Highland Avenue, almost going towards the bingo hall of St. Mary's First Nations. There's a lot of development going on there. And I was able finally to get in contact with a man who said, I can take you there. You'll need boots. So next time you're in town, we'll get a crew. I've known about that for many years and have not been able to get there. And one of our elders in our community, her name is June Carty. She's 97 years. She remembers going there, and she tried to direct the city of Fredericton to go. They went up with their the machines, is it LiDAR, or, when they push them,
Oh, or maybe ground penetrating radar.
penetrating radar, and they could not find any graves. But anyway, I'm hoping that my ancestors will direct me there, and then I'm going to challenge the city to help me bring this, bring the cemetery to a proper state, a healthier state. And
Right.
And do you do a lot of work in the archives as well?
I do. I haven't. I mean, I've been doing a lot. Like I was there in May again for my son's project, and worked really a lot with Josh because I was looking for pictures for the book. I worked with Josh and with Meredith Batt. But yes, the archives has been great. Especially, it helped me with my dissertation a lot because it helped document and ground my research in New Brunswick, even though a lot of my research, what's very interesting about me is that my fifth great grandmother came to New Brunswick. When she arrived from Virginia, from a plantation in Virginia, she arrived in what was then, it was Nova Scotia, but it was, property of England. So that she arrived in St. John and somehow managed to get herself further inroads to Nova Scotia. And she was hired by a soldier who was a lawyer from New Jersey, Isaac Allen. You know the name, Isaac Allen. He was one of the main lawyers who helped negotiate the divide from New Brunswick and Nova Scotia in 1784. So he was given 2,000 acres as pay for helping negotiate the divide and do the land boundaries. And he brought my fifth great grandmother, her name was Sabina, brought her back to New Brunswick.
Okay. Oh, I was going to say, so you've mentioned a book that you and your son are working on, and could you tell us a little bit more about that project?
The project is called Still Here, Preserving Our Legacy. And I really can't give the article justice, but I'm going to just make a note to send you the CBC interview that my son did in the Beaverbrook Art Gallery.
It'd be fantastic.
He received a big grant. I think it was around 60 grand, which isn't a lot, but it is to start a project. And so back in April of 2023, he got a team together. Gary Weeks, a photographer, Jeannie Rediker, who looks after the books, myself, Tondaway, and from time to time we hired like graphic artists and etc. So I was asked to find families and tell about what we wanted to do. We wanted to do an interview one-on-one with 15 families. We wanted them to share any archival pictures they were comfortable with. My son had a very high profile portable scanner. And when they would go to the homes to photograph the individual family members, he would bring the scanner and scan whatever pictures they were comfortable sharing. And everything would go into a book. My son is a poet, so he's written poems for every one of the families. I've found archival documents. And so this coffee table book is going to be a testament of the legacy of New Brunswick. 15 families. They've all written a personal essay. As I said, I did all the interviews, most of them from here, from Zoom. And when I was back in New Brunswick, I did one interview with a lady in St. John. She drove me all around the black areas in St. John, and I had the microphone, and we just talked. It was really
That's great.
Oh, that's great.
And then Gary Weeks, who's a phenomenal photographer, he did individual solo photos, and I can't give the project justice because I don't know the technical terms, but they have a lot of photos. And I will share with you that Gary's idea was the space where the Beaverbrook has given us. There's one big room, which they're calling the hug room, and he's making a man-made chandelier. So he's taking 170 individual people, and he's somehow photocopied them or, electronically pressed them on silver mirror tiles, and they're going to be hung from the ceiling. And we've had two deaths of people that were part of the project, and I think we may have those people hung on gold tiles and the rest in silver. We have
Oh, wow.
weekly meetings every Thursday night, so we meet tomorrow night. So anyway, that's an example of how people are going to be wowed with this exhibit. And my son hopes that it goes national, like across Canada.
That'd be awesome.
Fantastic.
And Goose Lane, I understand, has the contract for the book, right? Excellent. And when that comes out, I suspect we'll notice it because we're both fans of the Beaverbrook and going around. But please do remind us so we can plug it again on the show.
Yep. Yeah, it'd be a future,
once that's out.
an excellent future hit piece for the show for us to highlight, and maybe get you and your son back on at some point too. And we're cognizant of the time, but we had a couple more questions. Just you've talked a little bit about this broadly, but so what sort of things does Reach do as an organization? It sounds like you're making New Brunswick Black communities more visible just through your own work and kind of highlighting and telling stories about it. But Reach also physically makes graves more visible. Like you guys are doing restoration work. You talked a little bit about that. And so what's the process for Reach for kind of deciding? You've got a couple projects on the go right now, restoring some of these cemeteries. And what are the next goals for what Reach is going to be doing down the road?
Well, the next goals are going to be pretty much the same. Like, I am the executive director, and as I said, Reach was my baby because it was born out of my dissertation. So I just want people to know that they can contact me and tell me about potential abandoned cemeteries or graveyards, and I will make every attempt to find them and make them known. We have a wonderful techie person, again, my cousin Jen, who is doing like an Excel spreadsheet. But I think at some point we'd like to do, I think the software is called ArcGIS. And we'd like to populate the province of New Brunswick with Black history. So we would put foundational Black churches, foundational Black schools, of course, graveyards, Black businesses, and possibly Black homes. Our focus is to get the graveyards, like the representation of our Black community on the province of New Brunswick. So that's our long-term goal is to be able to populate the province with our own history and give credit to Reach. And we've had wonderful partners. The Provincial Archives, I went to them and I said, I've started this organization. We've started this organization. We'd like to partner with you. My vision was like, there's a military database. I want, in Canada, a Black database of Black graves. What's wrong with that? Like, if you're from Sweden or from the U.S. and you know that you come from Canada, could you punch in your family name and see where your relatives are? So I went to Joanna Ayton, who's the head of the archives, and I said, we'd like to partner with you, but we're not really sure what we want. And she goes, that's okay. We want to partner with you. And I said, well, we're not sure what it looks like. That's okay. We will partner with you. So I had thought about shared space on maybe like having a private page maybe in the archives for the list of my cemeteries, but truly that's only been spoken about. We've never made any actions towards concreting that. And I've also written, like, I'm not a shy person. I'm 4'11.5". I'm not shy. Ken and Gabe, you met me in Saskatoon. I did the same with the gentleman from the Mercury. I said, what have you done for Black history? And he said, well, not much. We have a chapter on the Black Battalion. I go, shame on you. You've got to talk to me and some of my colleagues. Anyway, so I've written like the head of Veterans Affairs. I have written Justin Trudeau, because I really believe that there should be a Black database somehow federally, not necessarily associated with military, but somehow, and I haven't really manifested what it should be, and I can only think about with death. So to be announced what I come up with and who I can get to support my project.
Okay, and we're certainly looking forward to seeing all that. And we should say, we forgot to plug your website. And is that the best place to follow you? Is at
Yeah, that's
reachnb.com?
great. Yeah, you can email us there, or even I use my Mary Louise McCarthy at Gmail a lot, and I still like I keep both of those emails open, like Reach and my regular Gmail. I'm not fussy, and I'm just Mary, and Mary with a mission, you know.
Okay, well, is there anything else you'd like to share with the listener before we let you go? We're conscious we've taken up a fair bit of your time, and we thank you for sharing that with us.
Not really, just that if you know anyone, if you can go back in your families and you think about any Black communities or Black families that live near you, that please reach out if you're aware of any abandoned or forgotten burial sites. I'm open to chatting with anyone. So, and as I said, my email is marylouisemccarthy@gmail or mary@reachnewbrunswick.com. So,
Okay,
That's
and
fantastic.
listener, that'll be in the show notes for you to find as well. So
okay.
yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mary. Thank you for making time for us, and it was great to talk to you again. And I maybe next time we'll meet out in the field in New Brunswick.
I love that so much.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us, Mary. We really appreciate it.
No problem.
And well, Ken, I think that it is time for our hit pieces, and we've got a couple of hit pieces to share with the listener tonight.
I think it's time for hit pieces.
Have we not done hit pieces for a while, or have we? I feel like we did an all hit piece show, and I feel like there's been time travel, and it's just been a little bewildering here on the hit pieces.
I think we had a hit piece last episode, Maddie McCleister's book.
Oh, of course, yeah, finding agricultural fields.
Yeah.
Yeah, listener, I time traveled so much that I inserted a podcast episode instead of Jason Isbell's concert in my I believe what's called a headcanon, and so there we go. But tonight, what we've got, or this afternoon, wherever we are, we've got an article called "The Extinct Sea Mink." I actually don't know how to say this word, Neogal macrodon, and it's a putative specimen in the New Brunswick Museum, Canada, confirmed as bad news. Sorry to say, it's actually the American mink, Neogal Vision, and this is by some folks over at the New Brunswick Museum. That's Donald F. McAlpine, Howard M. Hine, and Scott A. Pavey. And this paper is about a taxidermied specimen from Campobello of a mink that, and this is from something called the Clark Collection. And basically, they were eventually able to get DNA from it. And if you were hoping that this was going to be an extinct sea mink specimen, bad news. Its DNA is an exact match for the American mink, so it's not a sea mink. And
They can extract DNA from a taxidermied specimen?
yeah, news to me too.
Oh, crazy.
I assume it's because the fur stays the same.
Yeah, but I would have thought like all the chemicals that they use in the process would have done something to the fur.
Yeah,
Maybe,
I assume that's why
it's not at a cell level or a DNA level, I guess.
Yeah, although I assume those complications are why it's taken so long to square this away.
Right.
Yeah. But this means that, so at this point now, the only sea mink specimens are from shell heaps, which is kind of interesting.
Incredible.
Yeah. And so, Ken, you've also got exciting tip piece tonight.
Yeah, we do. And so this is a new article in the book "Working as Indigenous Archaeologists: Reckoning New Paths Between Past and Present Lives," and that's co-edited by George Nicholas and Joe Watkins. And the article is by Bonnie Newsom at the University of Maine, and it's called "The Past is Exactly How It Should Be: Lessons in Indigenous Archaeology from a Birch Bark Biter." And so for those of you that don't know, birch bark biting is actually a traditional Wabanaki art form where small sheets of birch bark bitten and into different sorts of patterns. There's some excellent images actually in Bonnie's article about sort of a raw bark bitten piece, and then how it can be illuminated by light, which creates sort of a whole other art object. And the article is about Bonnie's experience in archaeology and kind of has these sort of three interweaving themes about how she envisions her work as an archaeologist. First of all, she views it as a service to the public, and that's like kind of these many publics that she's talking about to her community. So she's a Penobscot woman, and she kind of weaves it through sort of thinking about patience, transparency, and preservation as ways to be both an Indigenous person in archaeology, how to better oneself in doing archaeology, and how, in general, archaeology is better. The more patient we are, the more transparent we are, and the better we do at listening to people about what should and how can we preserve the past. And the metaphor for this is how birch bark biting is a technology, or is an art form that has been brought back to Wabanaki people and revitalized within the community, and takes a lot of patience. Produces beautiful art forms that are transparent, and it's a way to preserve Wabanaki pasts.
That's great, and really anything by Bonnie Newsome is worth reading.
Yes, yeah, it is, but this volume is really interesting, and so there's a lot of prominent names in both Black archaeology and Indigenous archaeology that have articles in there, very personal accounts about engagements with archaeology, some negative, some positive, and how they've learned from it, and what's it like being an academic, and that kind of thing. And so, encourage anybody who has access to it to get. Grab the book or the ebook. The book comes out at the end of September. The ebook is out now from Routledge. And so check to see if your library has a copy.
That's great. And as always, listener, we will put each of these in the show notes. And I'm realizing as Ken gives the citation for Bonnie's paper that I forgot to give you the citation for the CMIC paper. It's in the Archives of Natural History, volume 51. So just out recently here in 2024, pages 171 to 188. That's a publication of Edinburgh University Press. And so, and I will say this paper is a little bit hard to find, unless you're really into CMIC. I've given you the too long didn't read, but you might be able to get it through interlibrary loan, which is what I had to do. It's a short note is what it's listed as.
But only if you're into the American CMIC. Yes,
that is true. I mean, or if you're into taxidermy. Maybe if you're a fan of taxidermy and you're wondering if you too could learn how to get some DNA out of taxidermy, this might be just the ticket for you.
Exactly. You could definitely reach out to the authors for that. How you do that?
Yeah, I think some technique, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, Ken, I think we've gotten to the end of another episode. And it's time to step into the TARDIS again and go hurtling through time.
We are ahead in time though today. Like we are not. I feel like because this is recorded all in the same day, the experience of the interview will be very different, and this will come out. For the listener, the recording today will come out 2 weeks time in an actual fortnight. So we're right on schedule, I think. Actually,
I think we are. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I don't think there is a TARDIS for this one. I think we've parked the TARDIS.
Well, didn't we had to use the TARDIS to get to the front? Well, did we time travel ahead to put the ending on because we had to time travel backwards to put the front part on?
That is very true. Yeah, it wasn't tooth to tail, was it?
No, it wasn't. We've got to be careful, Ken. We're going to tear ourselves apart in the time warp here. We're literally burning the candle at both ends here.
Who knows? Maybe what we've been doing every time we go back and forth in time is we've actually we thought we entered into the multiverse during the last episode, but actually every time we've done this, we have created all sorts of branch timelines, and it's just a total mess now.
It's true. Well, Ken, I've got to let you go because I have to see Jason Isbell in 2 minutes.
What was the guy you're trying to see? Actually,
David Bromberg. So maybe out of some temporal loop, you'll end up at a David Bromberg concert when you hang up the Zoom. I hope so. It could be really any time between, I think, the late 60s and now at that point.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah, great. But, all right, listener, well, we're looking forward to talking to you both this fortnight and 2 fortnights from now. And Take care. Stay cool.
And stay tuned for some human environmental interactions.
That's right. All right, listener. Have a good 2 weeks.
Yeah. Bye, listener.